Hello, everybody, and welcome to So Awake, Non-Duality channel.
Thought it would be fun to do a little bit of an impression or a hook. It's something I don't really share often on this channel. Today, wanted to share one of the most recent insights that has been rather rich. We can call this video the Curiosity Continuum, the essence of curiosity and a new way to engage with that. The Curiosity Continuum Technique, something like that. I'm still playing with it a little bit. So, to get into it a little bit more thoroughly, we could really look at our relationship with curiosity and see how important it is in the path. Curiosity is such a crucial aspect of this discovery. We can call it self-discovery. Going back to that Dogen quote, we must know ourselves in order to forget ourselves. And the curiosity seems to be the guiding light or the energy in that. And really, with this new insight, it has been proving to be a really powerful point of engagement for everyone. Often I'm asked why I have a YouTube channel and why I give all these insights away. And it doesn't really feel like that. It just feels like these things are shared and it's just a unique perspective that arises in intuition and insight and becomes shared. But with that, I do want to thank everyone who's a member of the channel and for all of your support. If you find any value to any of these pointings or any of these videos, please consider joining the channel as a member or contributing with buying a coffee. It really does help. In the culture that we live in, we don't have these ashrams. We don't have a supportive culture so that someone can do this really without getting paid. And since this is a full-time engagement for me, the money that's made on the YouTube channel, in addition to the money that's made in sessions, allows this to continue. And so for all of you who have contributed in any way, thank you very much. If it does seem to be valued, consider being a member and supporting in some way. Would love to be able to continue giving back. A big portion of everything is given away. Last year, there was around 250 to 300 sessions that were given as free sessions. It feels right. It feels natural to give. This isn't intended to be a money grab. This is just a reminder that your eyes, your ears, your participation, all of the things that you provide just by participating allows this to continue. So just wanted to say thank you to everyone. And if it does seem to have value, maybe consider contributing in some way. It doesn't feel like it's just being given away. Instead, it feels like these things arise, they are shared, and it wants to be shared. That's it. For no other reason than just the expression itself. So, getting into this, the point of conclusion is so interesting. If we really look at it, and we see that the way the mind utilizes curiosity, the mind tends to take this essence of curiosity and turn it into a tool or a means to an end. We tend to utilize curiosity as a means to reach a conclusion. And that part right there is extremely crucial. If the curiosity is a means to a conclusion, then what tends to happen there is we reach a place where we are no longer curious. When the mind is satisfied in conclusion or certainty, we tend to abandon curiosity, and right there's the rub. Because the intuition and the insight that's coming up is saying that we are curiosity. It is an aspect of our authenticity. It is an aspect of our truest nature. And if it is ever abandoned, then we are somehow stepping away from the truth of our experience, from the truth of ourselves. So what if we took that experience of utilizing curiosity as a means to some sort of conclusion and we flipped it on its head? And this is the insight that came up. From here on out, we can utilize the conclusion as a cause for curiosity. As soon as we reach a conclusion, we can right there begin to step into curiosity. And here's the piece that becomes rather interesting. We start to realize in our exploration of thought that our thoughts are really just a series of conclusions, that we really cannot be curious in thought. There's an illusion taking place there. What's really happening is that we're just landing on a series of conclusions that lead to more conclusions that hold up more conclusions. And here is the rub. To be living in a conclusion means to be building a construct of experience from that conclusion. But it becomes really clear that we usually do not start to look at the initial conclusion to see if there's any validity or if there's any truth or any aspect of that conclusion that is real. Instead, what we tend to do is buy the conclusion and build more conclusions from there, and now we start to understand identification in a more visceral way. So at the very outset of conclusion, if you let conclusion be the cause of curiosity, you will start to see how the curiosity continuum works. If the conclusion is the beginning of curiosity rather than the end, then we don't rest and live in the conclusion. Instead, it brings us into the visceral nature of curiosity itself, and then curiosity guides us maybe to another conclusion. But once again, a conclusion is the cause of curiosity, and that thrusts us back into the continuum again and again. Every conclusion is the beginning of curiosity. And in that, we start to recognize that we are the verb of living. We are the ongoingness of awakening. We are the dynamic force of curiosity, and we stop subscribing to the nouns, the conclusions that seem to live in these thoughts. It's really hard to identify with dynamic experience because it is so fleeting. To be immersed in our experience, it is here and gone, constantly, ever changing. It's hard to have a sense of permanence in that. We really would have to make that up. We would really have to impose that. And so the more often we step into experience with this essence of curiosity, the less likely we will be identifying with anything. And even more than that, it will start to give you a very visceral sense of your relationship with thought. And this is where a past video comes into play, the wedge technique. From there, you can start to see if there is a have-to in these thoughts. To see your relationship in thought, you'll start to realize that there is a freedom in the arising of a thought, that there's no have-to engage. There's no have-to do anything. I mean, it seems like we can, but we don't have to. There is where we start exploring agency in a more intimate way. So going back to this curiosity continuum, if you allow any conclusion to be the cause for curiosity, the secondary part of this, which is really crucial, is realizing that curiosity cannot live in the thought, since thought seems to be just a series of conclusion. That means curiosity must live in the senses, and that becomes very, very apparent as we engage. So, the conclusion is a cause for curiosity in the senses. And in the senses, we begin to have some more realizations. We realize that we cannot unsee what is seen, we cannot unhear what is heard, we cannot unfeel what is felt, unsmell what is smelled, untaste what is tasted. These senses are already wide open. They are antenna, and they are antenna that are just wide. Oftentimes people will come into session and ask, well, how do I open up? How do I become vulnerable? How do I let go? It's in the senses. You move your attention so directly into the senses that you realize the openness that's already present. The senses are wide open. And even though we can close our eyes, we're still seeing with our eyes closed. This is kind of crucial here. But this also kind of gives us a little insight around why sometimes the visual field, when people are exploring that, can be a little bit more tricky, because there seems to be a lot more agency over this particular sense, the sense of seeing. But when it comes to sound and hearing, there is no ability to close the ears. I mean, of course, we could plug our ears with our fingers, but the point is the sense itself doesn't close. Same thing with smell. It cannot be unsensed. Once it is sensed, it is immediate and present. That's pretty juicy. So, the conclusion arises. We allow that to be the cause of curiosity. Then we step into the senses because curiosity only exists in the senses. And even further, the senses are infinitely curious. They are just open. They just sense. And then we start to realize we are sensing. We are the senses. We are what we feel. We are what we sense. That dam breaks open, and we realize we are experience itself. This is presence. So we can now start to look at these thoughts as maybe an assistant. This is really what thought seems to be anyway. When thought takes a personal tone and it tends to have a narrative that seems to be about judgment or some sort of internalizing of an experience, it can feel rather personal. But if we really pay attention to the objective nature of thought, it's simply suggesting, and it's simply assisting. It's just fragments of experience being temporarily grasped and let go as long as we allow that to happen. As long as we don't bring the attention of fixation into the thought, it lets itself go. And so while we move deeply into the senses and the experience of feeling and sensing, we're not entertaining those thoughts. We're not giving them cause to stick around, and they let themselves go. This is letting go. This is openness. This is vulnerability. It's already built in. It's already primary. So this is the way this can work on a very visceral, personal level. Let's say the thought arises that says, well, this is hard. There's a conclusion there. It is saying that there's a certainty in that experience. So now we look at that experience and we let that be the cause of curiosity. And so what we do is we immediately move attention into the senses, into feeling, and we start to detect the acute aspects of sensation. Still really focusing on from the throat down to behind the navel, since this is where most of our beliefs tend to live, it seems. We start to feel something. Now I'm feeling buzzing. I'm in the experience of buzzing. And I'm looking to see if buzzing is hard. And it ceases to make sense there. It gives us a little bit more insight. Buzzing and hard, they aren't compatible. We start to recognize that these thoughts that are evaluating and assuming based on our experience are simply just guessing, and they aren't compatible with the experience itself. To be in the midst of that experience, hard no longer makes sense, which gives us another clue around the term making sense. The only thing that ever actually makes sense is in the senses. If we really entertain thought in this objective way, letting it be the cause of curiosity, letting these conclusions send us into this curious exploration, we start to see that the thoughts are not compatible with the experience. That's really crucial. Because as we do this over and over and we continue to essentially prove it, the thoughts become less persistent. Thoughts tend to be rather fair, and when they notice that there isn't a compatibility, they stop fighting so hard, they let themselves go, and then we start to have a slowing down of thought all the way to the experience of a vacancy of thought, and we are just in the senses. We are just in presence, the pre-sensing of what is already here. So we just follow the senses using that. And to put it into an interesting metaphor, this is what's come up this week, so I'll just go ahead and use that. Imagine we're in a house in the desert somewhere, and it's nighttime, and we're simply inside lounging around on a chair, and all of a sudden we hear the front door open, and this very small child bursts in and says, "You have to come outside. There is a meteor shower. There are all these shooting stars everywhere. It's incredible." Now, if we were to take that information at face value, we would probably just continue sitting in the chair and be like, oh, okay. And that's it. But if we move into our curiosity with a really simple phrase, actually, this can be useful. In fact, I definitely encourage you to use this phrase verbatim because it really captures the curiosity. But if we look at that child and we say, oh, let's see, then we will engage with that curiosity and we will go outside with that child and we will look at the sky and maybe see a meteor shower, maybe not, but that's irrelevant here. It's the curiosity itself to engage in that way. It's the energy of let's see. And this is also kind of crucial. It's not about proving the thought wrong. We don't have an objective there. It's not about proving the thought right. We don't have an objective there. We simply look at the conclusion and we say, let's see. And then we look and we see if we can sense that experience. And what you find here is it gets even more interesting. We cannot actually feel the emotions that our mind is telling us. Sadness doesn't make sense in the acute buzzing. Buzzing equaling sadness? That doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't seem like a constant. It doesn't seem like an exact comparison. And that's what we begin to find, is that the mind is just creating a series of equivalencies, a series of representations of experience. And that is what we can call identification. And that's what we can call reaction. Is buzzing equaling sadness? Kind of doesn't fit, does it? Pretty juicy. But you will see how the mind starts to work here. You'll be able to watch a lot more acutely, because the mind will still probably be working in the midst of these explorations. And it might say something like buzzing equals discomfort equals problem equals must find a solution equals got to do something equals desperation equals I got to do something about this, and we start moving away from experience. And by the time we start moving through all of those equivalencies and those representations of representations, we have moved away from the acute, initial, present, spontaneous, and immediate experience in our perception. So it really is this simple. Move your attention directly into the acute experience, and you will find all sorts of characterizations there. You will find color, texture, buzzing, vibrating, sinking, expanding, sharpness, heaviness, all these things. It's pretty vividly interesting. It's infinitely curious, sensing itself. The curiosity continuum seems to work really well. And if you do this, you don't have to take it on in an extremely diligent way. In fact, it's recommended that you just take it easy with this and pick and choose as you go. You don't have to obsess about looking at every possible conclusion and attempting to break it down. As you go, you will start to create a natural rhythm of engagement, of curiosity, and it will just start taking care of itself. But the best part here is you won't be able to actually prove a conclusion in the senses. It just doesn't seem possible. But as always, don't take my word for it. See for yourself. Take on that energy. Let's see. And really use that word, or that phrase rather, let's see, because it keeps it open. Let's see if this is hard. Wow, I'm finding like a dropping sensation. Is dropping hard? Doesn't quite make sense. It's not quite an equivalency. So when we see that, the thought begins to let itself go. It's actually pretty perfect this way. And also, the benefit of this is I'm not encouraging you to move away or avoid or fight the conclusions. The conclusions come up on their own. Instead, now you are harnessing the conclusion as an ally to encourage further curiosity. This is very akin to improvisation in acting, where we say yes and as part of the practice. You're essentially doing that with the conclusion, except you're saying, oh, I acknowledge, I see you, let's see, now moving directly into experience. And you find that these thoughts are simply attempting to model experience, but they do not encapsulate the experience. This starts to reveal more about thought as you go, that thoughts can't encapsulate anything in experience. Thoughts only think thoughts. Buzzing isn't sadness. Buzzing equals buzzing. And here you will start to realize that the sensation defines itself. There is no equivalency. Heaviness is just heaviness. It's nothing other than heaviness. Heat is just heat. It's nothing other than heat. Yellow is just yellow. It's nothing other than yellow. But really pay attention to the interpretive qualities, because sometimes a conclusion will take us to another conclusion. Well, this is darkness. What does darkness mean? Can you find darkness in the sensation? Get into the acute aspect of the sensation, the very minuscule parts of the sensation, and it will be very basic and very primary. That's also important. Let the conclusion be the cause for curiosity. Say, let's see, move into the experience, and see if there's any compatibility with the thought and the sensation. And you'll find that these thoughts are really just random all the time, that they aren't pertaining to anything, especially the experience that is right here, right now. Because the truth is, we can only prove anything right here, right now, and we can only prove it through the experience itself. And for those of you that have done this in a lot of depth, you probably will also start to realize that as you start looking at sensation, can you prove that that sensation is even there? It starts to get much more interesting. It's unwrapping a never-ending gift, which is the point. This isn't about some perceived or imagined outcome. It's just the unwrapping itself. It's just the curiosity itself. Here you will find curiosity makes no conclusion. The senses don't conclude. We don't hear until there's no hearing necessarily. The hearing is just the hearing, that's it. They seem to be infinitely curious, and we rest in that experience and we start to somehow move into our truest nature. We are sensing, we are feeling. That is our primary experience as a human being. And then from there, it can start to get rather wild. But if we do all take this step into discovering our primary, our truest nature, what is most authentic for us, going back to that Dogen quote, one must know themselves before they forget themselves. He's speaking to the senses. He's speaking to what is known right here, right now, what is somehow or somewhat verifiable. Buzzing. That's it. And that seems to even collapse even further as we go. The rabbit hole just continues. There are just turtles all the way down. But for those of you that are still in this relationship of battling thought and attempting to make conclusions away from thought, just know that thought, it doesn't really matter the quality of the experience. It just wants you to make a conclusion so that you move away from the curiosity. And it's doing that because it views these experiences as mysterious and possibly dangerous because thoughts can't feel. Thought actually can't be curious. Thought can't sense in that way. And so it sees this as a potentially dangerous landscape, and it's attempting to protect you from that. So in a way, what you're doing is you're proving to the thoughts that there's nothing to protect just by simply being in the essence of curiosity in the senses. Conclusion is the beginning of curiosity. It's not the end. These conclusions are just artificial pauses in the midst of a curiosity continuum that never ends. It's an experience that flows in and out of itself. It flows out only to flow right back in. It's toroidal this way. It is the Ouroboros swallowing its own tail. It is the infinity. It is all these things. Stick with that, and you will start to see a lot of visceral aspects of your primary experience. You will start to taste the strawberry for yourself instead of living in a model or a representation of your reality. And that really is what this is all about. That's the magic there. So this is the Curiosity Continuum. This is one of the most recent insights. This has been really alive in a lot of sessions lately, and it seems to be providing quite a bit of engagement. If we stay in this place of curiosity, we begin to just see this endless unfolding. When the child comes in and says there's a meteor shower, we don't just take the word for it, nor do we reject it. We simply say, oh, let's see. Yes, and we engage. That's it. Really, really simple. And now you have a little something, a little anti-practice, a little gentle practice to engage. Notice the conclusion. See if that is compatible with the sensing. And you will probably find it just doesn't make sense. Benefit there is you're in the senses, you're in presence. And just keep exploring that as deeply and thoroughly as possible. Let curiosity and creativity, intuition, and insight take you from there. You will start to get the hang of this. You will start to develop your own rhythm very, very naturally. And we can say in a very visceral human way, this leads to an experience that we call equanimity. We start to see the nature of thought as just suggestion. We start to see our relationship with thought. We start to recognize we don't have to engage. And from there, thoughts seem to live on equal footing with the rest of the senses, that there is no dominant experience. It's just what is arising is what is. Everything is self-defining. The buzzing is the buzzing. The thought is just the thought. It's not representing anything, but you must prove that diligently. One more thing around conclusions. Even if you've done this a few times, you must continue to do it every time there's an arising conclusion. Because if we conclude and then we think we know what we're doing, we've basically fallen for the trap again. So in other words, if it seems to have a consistency in experience and there's something in our mind that says, oh, I know where this goes, I know how this is, and then that's what we're kind of engaging with, we're not actually engaging with curiosity there, we're engaging with that conclusion. So from there, look at that conclusion and see if that lives in the senses every single time as if it's brand new. And you will probably find that there is no consistent experience. There is always variation, always something new in experience. Only the thoughts can give us a sense of consistency and a sense of permanence here. So if it does seem consistent and permanent, look carefully at that conclusion and see if that lives in the senses. Let the conclusion be the cause for curiosity, and you will suddenly find that the continuum of this curiosity is what life seems to be all about. Really not necessarily a purpose, but just because. A curiosity, after all, is the curiosity. That's it. It's definitely a much more fun way to play. So with that in mind, really, really looking forward to hearing how this experience goes for all of you. Please put it in the comments. Please engage and let me know how it goes, because it does seem to be a rather interesting way to engage, and would love to hear more about it.